Everyone talks about raising your vibration like it's something you add. More meditation, more gratitude journals, more positive affirmations taped to bathroom mirrors. But Carl Jung discovered something that turns the entire concept on its head. He found that vibration doesn't rise because you pile good things on top of your life. It rises when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold. And most people can't do that, because the things weighing them down feel like the things keeping them alive. Jung spent decades working with patients who were doing everything right on paper. The practices, the inner work, the reading, the self-awareness. And still something felt stuck. Still something heavy sat in their chest that no amount of positive thinking could move. What he discovered was that these people didn't need to add anything to their lives. They needed to release specific psychological attachments that were functioning like anchors, holding their entire being at a frequency far below what they were capable of. The problem was that these attachments didn't feel like anchors. They felt like identity, like loyalty, like love, like justice. They felt so deeply woven into who the person believed they were that releasing them felt like dying. And in a way, Jung would say, it is dying. A specific version of you has to end before a truer version can breathe. Today I'm going to show you the 5 things Jung identified that silently destroy your energetic frequency, why each one feels impossible to release, and what actually shifts inside you when you finally let them go. If you've been doing the work and still feel heavy, if you've been growing and still feel stuck, this will explain exactly what's holding you down and why it's been invisible to you until now. The first thing you have to let go of is the need to be understood. This one cuts deep because it doesn't feel like something you're holding. It feels like a basic human right. You went through something painful. You experienced things that changed you fundamentally. And all you want, all you've ever wanted, is for someone to really get it, to hear you fully, to look at your experience and say, yes, I see what happened to you, and it makes sense that you are the way you are now. Jung observed this need in nearly every patient he worked with, but he noticed something troubling about it. The need to be understood, when it becomes a driving force, doesn't actually connect you to people. It chains you to them, because you start performing your pain in ways designed to generate the specific response you're looking for. You tell your story not to process it, but to be validated by the listener's reaction. And when that reaction doesn't come, when they minimize or change the subject or offer advice instead of acknowledgement, something inside you breaks a little more. And then you try again, with someone else, in a different way, adjusting the story, emphasizing different parts, hoping this version will finally land. Jung recognized this cycle as one of the most exhausting patterns a person can run, not because the need is illegitimate, of course you want to be understood, but because the need has become a trap. You've made your emotional freedom contingent on someone else's capacity to comprehend your experience, and that's a cage you built yourself. Jung found that the people most desperate to be understood were almost always people whose reality was denied in childhood. The child who was told they were too sensitive, the child whose pain was dismissed or rewritten, the child who learned that their experience didn't count unless someone else confirmed it. That child grows into an adult who unconsciously believes that their feelings aren't real until witnessed by another person. So they spend their entire life seeking witnesses instead of trusting their own knowing. Here's what Jung discovered happens when you let this go. When you stop requiring understanding from others, something extraordinary shifts. You start understanding yourself, not performing your experience for external validation, but sitting with it privately, honoring it internally, letting it be true without needing anyone's permission. Your energy stops bleeding out toward every person you hope will finally get it. And that energy returns to you. It comes home. This doesn't mean you stop sharing or connecting. It means you stop needing the connection to validate what you already know is real. You share because you want to, not because you'll collapse without the response. And that shift, from desperate need to sovereign choice, changes your entire frequency. You stop vibrating at the pitch of "please see me" and start vibrating at the pitch of "I see myself." And people feel that. They feel the difference between someone reaching for them and someone standing in their own knowing. The second thing you have to let go of is the version of yourself you built for other people. Jung called this the persona, the mask you constructed to navigate a world that wasn't safe enough for the real you. And he was careful to point out that the persona isn't inherently bad. Everyone needs a functional interface with the world. The problem starts when you forget you're wearing the mask, when the performance becomes so automatic that you lose track of who's underneath it. Think about someone who spent their childhood learning exactly what kind of person their family needed them to be. The peacekeeper, the achiever, the easy one, the one who never caused problems. That child didn't choose this role. They were assigned it by a system that required their compliance to function. And they played it so well, for so long, that the role fused with their identity. They don't experience it as performance anymore. They experience it as personality. Jung spent years helping patients excavate their authentic self from underneath decades of persona. And what he found was always the same. The persona wasn't just a social strategy. It was an energetic prison. Maintaining a false self requires enormous amounts of energy. You're constantly monitoring, adjusting, suppressing, performing. Every interaction costs more than it should because you're not just being present, you're managing a production. Calculating what to reveal and what to hide. Reading the room to determine which version of yourself is required. This is why so many people feel exhausted by social interaction, even when nothing bad happens. Nothing bad happened on the surface, but underneath, they just spent 2 hours being someone they're not, and the energy required for that performance has to come from somewhere. It comes from your vitality, from your creative force, from the frequency you'd naturally vibrate at if you weren't spending all your resources maintaining an image. Jung was clear that releasing the persona isn't a single moment, it's a process. You start noticing where you perform, where your voice changes, where your opinions soften to match the room, where you laugh at things that aren't funny because laughing is easier than being honest. Each moment of noticing is a small death of the false self, and each death creates space for something authentic to emerge. But here's the part that stops most people. When you start dropping the persona, the people who loved the persona get uncomfortable. Your agreeableness kept certain relationships functioning. Your silence kept certain systems stable. Your performance kept certain people feeling safe. When you stop performing, those people experience it as betrayal. You haven't changed in a way they can celebrate. You've changed in a way that threatens what they were getting from the old you. Jung would tell you that this discomfort is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're doing something real. The persona was never free. It cost you everything to maintain. And the relationships that depended on your performance were never relationships with you. They were relationships with your mask. Letting the mask fall doesn't destroy real connection. It reveals which connections were real and which ones required your disappearance to function. When the persona drops, your energy changes immediately. Not because you've added something, but because you've stopped hemorrhaging vitality into a fiction. The exhaustion lifts. The heaviness in your chest loosens. You start vibrating at the frequency of who you actually are rather than who you were pretending to be. And that frequency, your real one, is always higher than the performed version. Always. The third thing you have to let go of is resentment disguised as justice. This is the one people fight the hardest because it feels righteous. Someone hurt you. They caused real damage. They never apologized, never acknowledged it, maybe never even recognized what they did. And you carry that injustice like a stone in your chest, not because you want to, but because putting it down feels like saying what they did was okay. Like releasing the resentment means releasing them from accountability. Like forgiving means forgetting. And you refuse to forget because forgetting feels like a second betrayal, this time of yourself. Jung understood this deeply. He watched patients hold on to resentment for decades, not out of weakness, but out of a profound sense of moral clarity. They were right. The wrong was real. The damage was measurable. And they believed that their resentment served as a kind of psychic court record, proof that the injustice happened, that it mattered, that it shouldn't be erased. But Jung discovered something devastating about chronic resentment. It doesn't punish the person who hurt you, it punishes you. Every day you carry that stone, your body holds the tension of that unresolved anger. Your nervous system stays activated against a threat that may no longer be present. Your thoughts return to the wound like a tongue to a broken tooth, not healing it, just confirming it's still there. And all of that activation, all of that tension, all of that recycled pain vibrates at a frequency that keeps you locked in the past. Jung was careful to distinguish between healthy anger and chronic resentment. Healthy anger rises, communicates a boundary, and passes through. It serves a function and then releases. Chronic resentment doesn't pass through. It builds a permanent residence in your psyche. It becomes an identity. The one who was wronged, the one who didn't deserve this, the one who's owed something that will never come. And here's what Jung found most insidious about resentment disguised as justice. It convinces you that releasing it means the other person wins, that letting go is losing, that moving on is surrender. So you hold on, not because it feels good, but because it feels right. And meanwhile, your entire vibration is anchored to the worst thing that ever happened to you. What actually happens when you release resentment isn't what you expect. You don't become soft or passive or accepting of harm. You become free. The stone leaves your chest and suddenly there's space for something other than the wound. Your thoughts stop cycling through the same grievances and start moving forward. Your body releases tension it's been holding for years, sometimes decades, and your frequency shifts because you're no longer vibrating in response to someone who hurt you. You're vibrating in response to who you're becoming. This is what it looks like when you start to find your way within. When you stop letting someone else's actions define the pitch of your entire existence. And if this resonates, if you feel the weight of what you've been carrying and you're ready to do the real inner work, our guide, True Self-Discovery, walks you through 24 reflection exercises built on Carl Jung's teachings, designed to help you confront exactly these patterns. Click below to begin that process, because the next part of what we're about to explore requires this kind of honest inner confrontation. The fourth thing you have to let go of is the belief that healing looks like arriving somewhere. This lie is everywhere. It's in the before and after narratives, the transformation stories, the idea that you're broken now, but one day you'll be healed, and that healed version of you will feel consistently good, consistently peaceful, consistently free. You'll arrive at some psychological destination and the work will be done. The wound will be closed. The past will stop hurting, and you'll finally get to rest. Jung rejected this completely. He observed that the people who believed in a healing destination were the ones most likely to give up when they didn't reach it. They do the work for months, sometimes years, and then hit a bad day, a triggering conversation, an old pattern resurfacing, a wave of grief that came out of nowhere, and conclude that the work wasn't working, that they hadn't made progress, that they were still broken. But Jung understood something about consciousness that the healing industry refuses to sell. There is no arrival point. There is no moment where you're done. Individuation, Jung's word for the process of becoming whole, is exactly that, a process, not a project with a completion date, not a destination you reach and then maintain. A lifelong, ongoing, sometimes brutal process of meeting yourself more honestly than you did the day before. This matters for your vibration because the belief in a destination creates a specific kind of suffering. You're constantly measuring yourself against an imaginary standard. Am I healed yet? Am I past this? Shouldn't I be over this by now? And every time you fall short of the imaginary finish line, your energy drops. You feel like a failure at the one thing you've been working hardest on. And that feeling of failure vibrates at one of the lowest frequencies a person can carry. Jung found that patients who released the destination fantasy experienced an immediate and measurable shift. Not because their problems disappeared, but because they stopped punishing themselves for still having problems. They could have a hard day without interpreting it as evidence that the healing failed. They could feel an old wound activate without concluding they were back at square one. They could be in process without needing the process to be finished. Think about how much energy you spend calculating your healing progress, comparing today to last month, checking whether this trigger means you're regressing, monitoring your emotional state for evidence of arrival or failure. That monitoring is exhausting, and it pulls you out of actually living your life into a constant surveillance of your own psychology. You become a project manager of your healing instead of a person having a human experience. When you let go of the destination, something paradoxical happens. You actually heal faster. Not because the letting go is a technique that accelerates healing, but because you've removed the biggest obstacle to it, the belief that you should be somewhere other than where you are. Jung called this radical acceptance of the present psychological moment. Not passive acceptance, not giving up, but stopping the war with your current state and working with what's actually here. Your vibration shifts when you stop vibrating against yourself. When you're not fighting where you are, resisting what you feel, punishing yourself for not being further along, your energy has space to move naturally. It rises on its own because you've stopped forcing it down with self-judgment and impossible expectations. You don't have to push your frequency up. You have to stop dragging it down with the belief that who you are right now isn't enough. Jung watched this transformation happen repeatedly. The patient stops trying to arrive and starts being present. The healing that had been stuck suddenly moves. Not because they found a better technique, but because they stopped blocking the natural movement of their own consciousness. The destination was the obstacle. Releasing it was the breakthrough. The fifth thing you have to let go of is the people who only loved the version of you that was dying. This is the one that breaks people open. Because these aren't always bad people. They're not always toxic or narcissistic or abusive. Sometimes they're your family, your oldest friends, people you've loved for decades, people who loved you, genuinely loved you, but loved a version of you that no longer exists. And they don't know what to do with who you're becoming. Jung observed this pattern with devastating clarity. A patient would begin the individuation process. They'd start integrating their shadow, dropping their persona, getting honest about what they needed and what they could no longer tolerate. And as they changed, the people around them would start resisting, not because those people were evil, but because the patient's transformation threatened the equilibrium of every relationship they were in. The friend who loved you because you were always available now feels abandoned by your boundaries. The parent who loved you because you were compliant now feels disrespected by your honesty. The partner who loved you because you were small now feels threatened by your expansion. These people aren't pretending to be hurt, they are hurt. The person they knew and loved is changing in ways that make the old relationship impossible, and they're grieving that loss even as you're celebrating your growth. Jung found that this was one of the most psychologically complex releases a person could face, because it's not a simple story of cutting off toxic people. It's the recognition that some people loved you in good faith, but loved a version of you that was constructed by trauma, shaped by survival, and maintained by self-abandonment. They loved the mask, the performance, the accommodating, boundaryless, self-sacrificing version that was slowly killing you from the inside. And now you have to face the devastating question. If they loved the version of you that was dying, what happens when that version is gone? Some of those relationships will transform. The people who loved you beneath the persona, who were just waiting for the real you to show up, those people will meet the change with relief. Finally, they'll say. Finally, you're being honest. Finally, you're letting me know the real you. These people exist, and finding them is one of the most profound experiences of the individuation process. But some relationships won't survive your becoming. And Jung was honest about the grief this causes. You lose people, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the relationship required your smallness, and you're no longer small. It required your silence, and you're no longer silent. It required a version of you that doesn't exist anymore, and you can't go back to being that person without destroying yourself. This grief is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. Jung would tell you it's the clearest sign that you're on the right one. Because vibration isn't just about what you carry internally, it's about who you surround yourself with. And if your closest relationships require you to perform a dying version of yourself, every interaction is pulling your frequency down. Every conversation where you pretend to still be the old you costs energy you don't have. Every gathering where you shrink to fit the role they need you in is an act of self-betrayal that registers in your entire being. Letting go of these people, or letting go of the expectation that they'll accept the real you, doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you stop paying for their comfort with your authenticity. It means you grieve the relationship that can't follow you into who you're becoming. It means you accept that some love stories end not with betrayal, but with evolution. You grew in a direction they couldn't follow. That's not failure, that's life. Jung observed that every patient who made it through this release experienced a vibration shift that was almost physical. They described it as lightness, as space in their chest where heaviness used to live, as silence in their mind where the constant negotiation of performance used to run. They didn't just feel better, they felt like themselves, many for the first time. Here's what Jung ultimately understood about vibration, though he wouldn't have used that word. Your natural frequency, the energetic state your consciousness moves toward when unobstructed, is already high. You're not trying to build something that doesn't exist. You're trying to remove what's blocking what's already there. Every attachment you release, every false self you drop, every resentment you put down, every impossible standard you abandon, every relationship you stop performing in, each one removes an obstruction, and your frequency rises not because you forced it up, but because you stopped holding it down. This is what makes Jung's approach so different from the mainstream vibration conversation. He wasn't interested in adding light to darkness. He was interested in removing what was blocking the light that was already present. Shadow work isn't about becoming something new. It's about uncovering what's been buried under decades of survival strategies, false identities, and unprocessed pain. You don't construct a higher vibration, you excavate it. And that excavation requires exactly what we've been talking about. Letting go of the need to be understood so your energy comes home. Letting go of the persona so you stop hemorrhaging vitality into fiction. Letting go of resentment so you stop vibrating at the frequency of your worst experiences. Letting go of the healing destination so you stop punishing yourself for being human. And letting go of the people who need you to stay small so you can finally take up the space your real self requires. None of this is easy. Jung never pretended it was. Each release feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Each letting go triggers grief before it triggers expansion. You're not just dropping habits or changing behaviors, you're dismantling an entire identity structure that you've lived inside your whole life. And the space between who you were and who you're becoming is terrifying. It's empty in a way that feels dangerous. It's quiet in a way that feels lonely. It's open in a way that feels exposed. But Jung found that every patient who stayed with the process, who let the old version die without rushing to construct a new performance, eventually found something in that emptiness. Not a new identity to perform, not a higher self to achieve, but a ground of being that had been there all along, buried under everything they'd been carrying. A frequency that was authentically theirs, not borrowed from anyone, not built for anyone, not dependent on anyone's validation or comprehension or approval. That frequency is yours too. It's been there the whole time, underneath the performing, underneath the resentment, underneath the desperate need to be understood, underneath the measuring and monitoring and self-judgment, underneath the relationships that required your disappearance. Your real vibration has been waiting beneath all of it, patient, steady, undiminished by everything you piled on top of it. You don't raise your vibration by becoming something more. You raise it by releasing everything that made you less. That's what Jung spent his entire career discovering. That's what shadow work actually accomplishes. That's what individuation is really about. Not addition, but subtraction. Not climbing, but unburdening. Not becoming someone new, but finally, after all this time, letting yourself be who you already are, without apologizing for it, performing around it, or asking permission for it. The weight you're carrying isn't protecting you, it's drowning you, and every piece you set down is another inch toward the surface, another degree of frequency that returns to its natural state, another breath you get to take as yourself, your full, unshrunk, unperformed, actual self. Jung would tell you that this work is the most important thing you'll ever do. Not because vibration is a spiritual achievement to unlock, but because living at a frequency that isn't yours, performing an identity that costs you everything, is the slowest kind of death. And you've been dying that death long enough. It's time to set it down, all of it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. One release at a time, one truth at a time. One moment of choosing yourself over the performance, over the resentment, over the impossible standard, over the relationship that requires your erasure. One moment at a time until the weight is gone, and what's left is just you. Vibrating at the frequency you were always meant to carry, the one that was yours before anyone taught you to hold it down. If you're ready to begin that honest excavation, to face what you've been carrying and understand why it's so hard to set it down, our guide True Self-Discovery offers 24 practical reflection exercises rooted in Carl Jung's teachings, designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery.